Homily for the 23rd Sunday of the year B. The deaf hear and the dumb speak. Our readings for this Sunday are from the prophet Isaiah chapter 35 verse 4 to 7, James chapter 2 verse 1 to 5, and the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 7 verse 31 to 37. In the first reading, the prophet Isaiah urges the people of Israel, who at that time were frightened, discouraged, and on the verge of despair, to take courage and be strong, because God is coming to save them. He says, "When the Lord comes, the blind shall see, the deaf shall hear, the dumb shall speak, the lame shall walk, and arid grounds shall be transformed into springs of water." In the second reading, St. James demonstrates that there is no room among Christians for class distinctions, because God has chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world and made them not only rich in faith, but also He made them heirs of the kingdom. The gospel story is about the healing of a deaf and dumb man by Jesus. The deaf hear and the dumb speak. At a time when the children of Israel were confronted with intense suffering, Prophet Isaiah delivered many cheering prophecies aimed at encouraging the people. In Isaiah 35, 3 to 7, he says, "Strengthen all weary hands, steady all trembling knees, and say to the faint hearts, Courage, do not be afraid. Look, your God is coming. He is coming to save you. The eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall be unsealed, the tongue of the mute shall be loosened." Isaiah 35, 3 to 7. Isaiah assured the people that in the presence of the Holy One of God, what is broken shall be mended, what is lost shall be restored, and life in its abundance shall become possible for many. Isaiah 61, 1 to 6. The fulfillment of this bold and audacious prophecy of Isaiah was announced when Jesus appeared in the synagogue of Nazareth. After reading the above passage, he announced, "This text is being fulfilled even as you listen." Luke chapter 4 verse 21. Many gospel passages show Jesus fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah, not only for the suffering children of Israel, but also for some of the suffering people of Gentile origin. Examples include the healing of the man born blind, John chapter 9 verse 1 to 41, the healing of the epileptic demoniac, Mark chapter 9 verse 14 to 29, the healing of the daughter of the Canaanite woman, Mark chapter 7 verse 24 to 30, the healing of the woman with the flow of blood, as well as Jairus' daughter, Mark chapter 5 verse 21 to 43, and finally the healing of the 10 lepers, Luke chapter 17 verse 11 to 19. Today's gospel narrates how the people brought a deaf mute to Jesus, requesting that he heals the sick man. Jesus took the man aside, put his fingers into the man's ears, spat onto a finger, and touched the man's tongue with the finger. He looked up to heaven and sighed, and then issued the healing command, "Ephata," and the man was restored to perfect health. The event demonstrates that Jesus is indeed the Messiah who makes the deaf hear, who makes the dumb speak, who makes the blind see, who makes the lame walk, and who makes the leper clean. With Jesus, all who suffer in any way can hear the good news of God's loving concern for them. All who are harassed by sickness and pain, or by some physical or mental handicap can now have their circumstances transformed. With Jesus, all who are humiliated by poverty and those who are distressed by unemployment can look forward for better days. All whose lives are diminished in any way can, in Jesus, hear the good news of God's loving concern for them. All who have been pushed to the margins by the unjust socio-economic structures of our societies, and those who have lost out in the winner-takes-all political system that many societies operate, all these people can, with Jesus, dream new dreams of success and fulfillment. With Jesus, all who are enslaved to sin and all who are tormented by guilt can find new freedom and salvation. With Jesus, all those of our generation whose consciences are deadened by pornography and premarital sex and by the crime of abortion, all those whose sensibilities have been numbed by drug and alcohol abuse, those whose spiritual lives have been compromised by forms of occultism, etc., can now live new lives of purpose and meaning in God's gracious presence. Yes, all whose hearts are broken by bereavement, all whose lives are shattered by betrayal, all whose dreams are aborted by failure in marriage and family life, all whose lives are dislocated on account of having children with severe handicaps, they can now sing for joy because Jesus is the one who heals the brokenhearted. He is the one by whose wounds we have been healed and by whose stripes we have been made whole. Isaiah 53:5. As with his encounter with the deaf and dumb, Jesus wishes to take each one of us aside. He wants to give us undivided attention. He wants to open our ears and loosen our tongues so we may hear his word and proclaim his praise. The Lord says in Revelation 3:20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." Option for the poor. The three readings of today deal with God's loving concern for his poor and suffering people. In the Christian church and among Christians, therefore, class distinctions should be considered out of place. There should be no room in the Christian community for disrespecting some people while adulating others because of wealth or the positions they occupy in society. In the Christian community, there should be no superiority or inferiority complexes. Christians should be among the first to appreciate the fact that all of us, men and women, are before God poor, handicapped, and needy people. We all come before God as poor beggars. The Apostle James comes out strong on this matter. He demonstrates that it is indeed silly for Christians to engage in such practices, and he reminds us that in the presence of God, the preference is for the vulnerable, poor, and the weak. Ours is a God who, in the words of the Virgin Mary in the Magnificat, pulls down the mighty from their thrones and raises up the lowly. Luke chapter 1 verse 52. Our God has consistently demonstrated a preferential option for the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized. The psalmist identifies him as father of orphans, defender of the widow, and friend of the poor. Psalm 68 verse 5 and Psalm 40 verse 17. He turns the social values of the world upside down, as it were, by elevating those the world considers contemptible, namely the poor slum dweller, the orphan, the widow, the sick, those living with disabilities, the childless couple, etc. Thus, we cannot claim to belong to this God of the poor if we are insensitive to the plight of the poor and the marginalized. If the rejection of some people by others does not cause us sorrow, and if the anguish of the neighbor does not cause us distress, how can we call ourselves children of God and disciples of the one who pitched his tent with the poor if we are not actively engaged in alleviating the sufferings of those in pain and advocating for those pushed to the margins of society by unjust social structures? When we encounter the Lord and he touches us as he touched the deaf and dumb man, we will not only be healed of our ailment, but we will be empowered to touch others too and to fill them up from their miseries, lift them up from their miseries. The God of the poor and the oppressed asks for our hands so he may use them to wipe the tears of the sorrowing. He asks for our ears so he may use them to hear the cry of the distressed. He asks for our eyes so he may use them to see the plight of the poor. Yes, he asks for our mouths so he may use them to speak against the many social injustices in our societies. May we listen to him and obey him. God bless you.